My parents gave my sister $75,000 on a Sunday afternoon in March, and they called it giving her a real foundation. What they gave me, their younger daughter, sitting in the kitchen while my sister's happy tears filled the living room, was a manila envelope, a deed with my name typed on it, and a sentence I've replayed more times than I can count. Maybe this will finally teach you some responsibility, Piper. Inside the envelope was the deed to a building my father had owned for 11 years and done nothing with. A 3,200-square-foot former auto parts store on a side street in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee. The roof on the eastern end had partially collapsed in 2019 and had been patched with a blue tarp ever since. The plumbing hadn't been touched since the 90s. 3 of the windows were boarded up with plywood that had gone soft with rot. 2 years before, the city had sent my father a code violation notice about the building's structural condition. He'd filed it in a folder in his home office and never opened it again. That was what I got, while my sister got $75,000, a bottle of champagne and my mother's arm around her shoulders. I took the envelope. I thanked him. I walked to my car and sat in my parents' driveway for 11 minutes before I started the engine. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was doing what I'd always done, absorbing the shape of something I couldn't change and looking for a use for it anyway. My name is Piper, and I was 28 years old the day I drove home with that deed on the passenger seat. This is the story of that building, what it cost me, and what it eventually cost them. I grew up in Maryville, Tennessee, 20 minutes south of Knoxville, in a house that was clean and organized and quietly suffocating if you were the wrong kind of daughter. My father ran a commercial property management company. He owned buildings, managed tenant contracts, kept everything on tight margins. He was precise the way people are when precision has always paid off for them. My mother was a licensed CPA with her own small practice. They were, by every external measure, a success story. My sister was their continuation of it. She was 3 years older than me and had always moved through our family like she'd been designed for it. Straight A's, the right college. A business degree, a husband who worked in commercial lending, a house in a neighborhood my mother described as up and coming in the right direction. She never missed a Sunday dinner. She called my mother on Tuesday and Thursday mornings without fail. She was, as my mother once said, in a voice meant to be a compliment that landed like a verdict, easy. I was not easy. I was the kid who took apart the kitchen faucet to understand how it worked and couldn't get it back together in time for dinner. I was the one who left the University of Tennessee after 2 years because I was spending more time in the woodworking shop than in any classroom. I was the one who used my entire savings at 24 to buy a secondhand router and a set of chisels and started building custom furniture out of a rented storage unit in North Knoxville. I built a small following online. I sold a few pieces. I thought I was building something real. Then I made the mistake of trying to grow faster than my foundation could hold. I signed a lease on a real workshop space without enough cash runway. I took on 3 large custom orders I couldn't deliver on schedule. My reputation took a hit before I'd built enough of one to survive it. Within 18 months, the business folded. I broke the lease early and paid the penalty out of money I didn't really have. I sold most of my equipment to cover the debt. My parents' response was swift and familiar. "We told you this wasn't sustainable," my mother said. Not, "I know how hard you worked." Not, "What happened, and how do we help you figure out the next step?" Just the confirmation of a conclusion they'd already reached about me before I'd ever started trying. I moved back home at 26. I worked as a Finnish carpenter for a local contractor, real, skilled, honest work, and saved enough to start over. My father occasionally asked when I was going to find something with a future. He never asked what I was learning. He watched me from across the dinner table, like I was a line item that kept coming in red. That was the ground beneath that Sunday in March. That was the context for my sister receiving a check and me receiving a problem wrapped in a manila envelope. Before I tell you what I did with that problem, make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is the part that changed everything. Let me tell you about the building. The property on Depot Avenue had been empty since 2017. Before that, an auto parts store. Before that, a hardware supply warehouse. My father had picked it up in 2013 as part of a commercial portfolio deal, intending to renovate it and lease it. He never got to it. It sat for 11 years, slowly failing, collecting city notices and good intentions. The first time I unlocked the front door, the key barely turned. The lock was that corroded. The smell hit me before anything else. Mold, mineral water, and underneath it something unexpectedly warm, old wood. The floors were concrete, cracked in the far corner where the ground had shifted. The ceiling ran 16 feet high, exposed steel beams, original to the building from 1948. Natural light came through the boarded windows in long diagonal strips. I stood in the middle of it and didn't think about what it was. I thought about what it could be. That was the thing about me my parents had never understood and never tried to. I didn't see finished things. I saw potential that hadn't been worked yet. They read that as impracticality. I understood it as the only way I'd ever seen clearly. I didn't have much money. I had the tools I'd slowly been rebuilding. A table saw I'd bought used, a planer, hand tools. 8 months of savings from the contractor job, a truck that ran, and hands that knew what they were doing. And I had a building with good bones in a neighborhood that, if you paid attention, was quietly starting to change. Knoxville's old city and the streets around it had been shifting for years. New coffee shops, gallery spaces, a restaurant that got covered in a regional food magazine. I'd watched it from the contractor jobs I worked in the area. New wiring, new plumbing, new floors going down. People were betting on this part of town. The city had greenlit a streetscape project 2 blocks over that was already pulling foot traffic. Depot Avenue was close, not prime yet, but close. I moved a mattress and a camp stove into the loft storage area above the main floor and quietly made it home. I needed to be in the building to work on it, and I couldn't afford rent elsewhere. I called a structural engineer I'd met through the contractor work. He walked the space and told me the bones were solid. The east wall repair was manageable. Plumbing needed a full gut. The electrical was original knob and tube and had to go. He gave me honest numbers. They were more than I had. So I did it in stages. The structural repair first. I did most of the labor myself and paid a mason for the work I couldn't safely handle alone. Then the electrical, because without it I couldn't run equipment. Then the plumbing because I needed water. I pulled permits for everything. I did it right. I paid for it by selling furniture out of the space before it was finished. I photographed pieces in the half-renovated building. Concrete floors, exposed beams, sawdust on the ground. And it looked exactly like the kind of workshop studio that people had started paying real money to shop at. My first sale from the new space was a white oak dining table, simple joinery, oil finish, to a couple who'd found me online and driven across town to see the space. They ordered a bench to match before they left. That table bought me new windows. The windows bought me more clients. Year 1 was brutal and honest and the best working year I'd had in my life. I didn't make much. I worked 7 days most weeks. I ate cheap because I had to, and I didn't mind because every dollar went back into the building or the tools. I wasn't building a lifestyle. I was building a foundation, a real one, made of actual labor. My father drove past twice that first year, I know, because people in the neighborhood told me. He drove slowly, they said, stopped for a moment in front of the building, drove on. He didn't come inside. He didn't call. He just watched from a distance, the way he had always watched me. Like he was observing an experiment he hadn't approved and wasn't sure how to categorize. My mother came once in person about 14 months in. She knocked on a Wednesday afternoon, wearing her good coat like she'd come from a client meeting. I was in the middle of finishing a set of shelving units. I let her in. She stood in the center of the space and looked around. The windows were fixed. The floor had been ground and sealed. 3 commissions were in progress on the work tables. A finished credenza stood against the far wall, waiting for pickup. "You've done a lot of work," she said. "Careful, neutral." "I have," I said, and kept sanding. She didn't stay long. She asked if I was eating enough. She looked at the credenza like she was trying to calculate its worth and not quite arriving at a number that satisfied her. She left with a tight smile and a promise to check in soon that I knew meant nothing until something changed. Something changed when the newspaper piece ran. A writer for a Knoxville regional publication did a feature on the revitalization of the Depot Avenue corridor, and she included my workshop, by then officially named Clearwater Furniture and Design, as one of the businesses anchoring the story. She described my work as precise and warm, handmade in a way that feels quietly radical in a market flooded with fast furniture. The piece ran with a photograph of a walnut dining set, shot in the workshop in the late afternoon light. I got 37 new inquiries in the 2 days after it published. After that, my family started visiting. My sister came first. She drove up on a Saturday, dressed in the kind of expensive casual that doesn't look expensive until you look twice, and walked through my showroom with her eyes a little too wide and her voice pitched about half an octave too high. "Piper, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I had no idea it had gotten like this." I showed her around. I watched her do the math. "You know," she said, running her hand along the edge of a coffee table I'd built from reclaimed gymnasium flooring, "our living room has never felt quite right. The furniture we bought from a place in Nashville, it's just not special." She looked at me with the specific expression of someone offering a transaction wrapped in a compliment. "I'd love for you to do something for us. We'd pay you. Full rate." I looked at her and thought about every Sunday dinner I'd been invisible at. I thought about the housewarming gift I'd brought her 2 years before, a small side table, careful joinery, a piece of wood I'd chosen for the grain, and the way she'd smiled politely and said they had a decorator handling all the furniture decisions, as if I'd brought her a candle. I'd taken the table home. It was in my showroom now, the first piece I'd ever built in this space, before I had the windows fixed or the floor sealed. It was the best thing in the room, and it wasn't for sale. "I'm booked out 8 months, I said. "Residential projects start at a $10,000 minimum, and my wait list is closed." She blinked. Oh, the warmth dropped out of her voice like a door closing. "Well, when it reopens." "I'll let you know," I said. She left without placing an order. Her husband drove past the building twice the following week. I saw his car from the front window. They were counting something. I just didn't know yet what number they were working toward. My father died 14 months after the newspaper piece ran. He had a heart attack at 67, on a Tuesday morning at his desk. My mother called me at 7:52 a.m. Her voice was stripped of everything I recognized in it, the precision, the management, the private pride she carried everywhere. She said, "Your father, he's gone." The funeral was a procession of business colleagues, men in gray suits. My mother and my sister moved through it as a single unit, composed and practiced. My brother, quiet and steady, the one who had always lived slightly outside the drama of our household, stood on the other side of the room and caught my eye once and gave me a look that said, I know what this is." A week later, I got a call from a man named Mr. Vance, my father's estate attorney. He asked me to come in for the reading. I drove into the city expecting nothing. My father had given me the building years ago. The deed was in my name. I assumed I was there as a formality. The conference room was plain and cold, a window overlooking a parking structure. My mother was there, in black, composed. My sister sat beside her, holding her hand. My brother sat across from them. He shifted his chair slightly toward me when I walked in. Mr. Vance worked through the estate methodically. The business assets, the property management company, the remaining portfolio, had been moved into a trust years ago for my mother's security. That structure was already settled. The personal assets were what the will addressed. To my brother, my father left $40,000, with a written request that he use it to finish the degree he'd put on hold to help a friend through a medical crisis 2 years earlier. My brother nodded once. He already knew. To my sister, my father left $15,000 and my grandmother's china set. My sister's hand tightened on my mother's arm. $15,000, she said quietly, with the controlled precision of someone doing calculations very fast. Mr. Vance continued without looking up. "To me," he said, "my father had left the 2 commercial lots adjacent to the Depot Avenue property. Lots my father had purchased 3 years ago as part of a planned expansion he had never mentioned to anyone in our family, except his attorney. Together, the lots added nearly 4,000 square feet of buildable footprint directly behind my workshop, with alley access connecting to a city parking structure 2 blocks north." The room went silent. My mother looked at me, and I watched the expression move across her face in stages: confusion, then calculation, then something hotter beneath both. Mr. Vance said my father had included a personal note. He read it aloud in the same level voice he'd used for the legal language. "Piper has never needed my help to build something. She has needed me to get out of her way. These lots are what I should have given her years ago. I'm sorry it took me this long to see clearly. She'll know what to do." I sat with those words without moving. My sister was already shaking her head. "That can't be right. He never told us about those lots. That's marital property. He can't just." The lots were purchased through a separate LLC established in your father's name 4 years prior to his death, Mr. Vance said, calm and unhurried. They do not constitute marital property under Tennessee law. The transfer has been verified. My mother reached across the table to cover my sister's hand. Neither of them looked at me. Is there anything else? I asked. There was an addendum. My father had filed a deed restriction with Knox County 14 months before he died. The restriction stated that the combined properties, the original Depot Avenue building along with the 2 new lots, could not be sold, transferred, or assigned to any immediate family member, including spouses, within 7 years of his death. 14 months before he died, before the newspaper piece, before the wait list, before any of it had fully materialized. He had believed in the forward motion of this thing before anyone else could see it clearly enough to want a piece of it. He had known his family. He had built a wall around me from the inside of a will. In the hallway outside the conference room, my brother walked with me to the elevator. He said quietly, he showed me those lots once, about 2 years ago, drove me past them and said, those go with the building. I thought he was just talking. He paused. He drove past your workshop every time he was on that side town. For almost 3 years. He never told you? No, I said, he never told me. The calls started 3 days later. My mother first. Her voice smoothed into something that wanted to sound like concern. Piper, sweetheart, your father wasn't himself toward the end. You know how stressed he was. Those lots were part of a larger plan for the company. We could manage them for you. Keep it all in the family, the way he would have wanted. I'll be fine, Mom, I said. Thank you for calling. My sister's text came that evening. Piper, I think we need to have an honest conversation. Those lots were part of Dad's business strategy, not some personal gift. I know you've worked hard on the workshop, but this is bigger than just your building. Let's be reasonable about this. I read it once and set my phone face down. They arrived together 2 weeks later, both cars at the same time, coming down the block too fast, parking in front of the building like they were claiming territory. I saw them from the window and took a breath. I opened the door and stood in it. My mother came in first. Piper, this has gone on long enough. We are not here to fight. We're your family. We just need to talk through what's fair. What would you like to talk through? I said. My sister stepped forward and the veneer was mostly gone now, the surface of it scraped away by 2 weeks of unanswered calls. The lots, she said, those were part of something larger than your little workshop. Dad wasn't thinking clearly when he filed the deed restriction 14 months before he died, I said. Mr. Vance can confirm the date. My sister went still. My mother's voice tightened. You are being selfish. You have your furniture business, Piper. That's enough. That's more than enough. You don't need all of this. Is this about proving something to us? Is this what this is? I looked at them both. I looked at them the way I'd looked at the building. The first morning I walked into it, seeing exactly what was there, without wanting it to be something different. I'm not holding anything against you, I said. I'm also not signing anything over, and I'm done explaining the difference between those two things. I turned around. I walked back to my bench, picked up the hand plane, and pressed it to the piece of white oak I'd been working on before they arrived. The wood curled up in clean ribbons. The whole room smelled like the inside of a living tree. They stood there for another minute. Then I heard the door open, then close. I kept working. The 2 lots were cleared, permitted, and under construction within the year. I expanded the workshop, added a second production bay, built a proper showroom addition facing the alley, which the city had since repaved and lined with planters as part of the corridor project. I hired 4 full-time employees, 2 production woodworkers, an apprentice fresh out of the community college's cabinet-making program, and an operations manager who handled the contracts and scheduling that used to eat every evening I had. Clearwater Furniture and Design had a name people in the city recognize now, 2 design publications, a 6-month waitlist for custom residential work, a growing commercial side that included restaurants, a boutique hotel in the old city, and a mid-size company that had relocated its headquarters to Knoxville and wanted their entire executive floor furnished in locally made pieces. My father's note was framed, not in the showroom where clients could see it, in the back office where I did my paperwork in the mornings before the shop opened, where the light came in first. She'll know what to do. I read it every day and tried to be worth it. My mother still lived in the house in Maryville. My sister and her husband stayed in Knoxville. We did not speak. I sent my mother a Christmas card. She did not send one back. My brother and I had dinner every few weeks. He'd gone back to school and was finishing his degree. He was steady and quiet and good, and he was the family I needed to stay close to. A regional design magazine sent a journalist to profile the workshop's expansion in my 4th year on Depot Avenue. We walked the space, talked about sourcing, talked about the shift toward commercial work. At the end, she asked the question I'd been expecting. Your father's property really made this expansion possible. And we understand your mother still lives on the family's property in Maryville. How does your family feel about what you've built here? I thought about the right answer and the true answer and decided they could be the same. My family and I measured success differently, I said. When I started here, everyone who knew about this building thought it was a liability. I think they were just using a different unit of measure. The journalist wrote something in her notebook. I looked out the showroom window. A couple was stopped on the sidewalk, the woman pointing at the dining table in the display window, saying something to the man beside her. He was nodding. I'm grateful for the building, I said. Whatever the intention behind giving it to me, it turned out to be exactly the right tool. That was the truth. Not every piece of it, but the part I could hand to a stranger without apology. Later that evening, after my employees had locked up and the shop was quiet, I sat on the steps of the loading dock out back and looked at the expansion space. Clean concrete, new overhead doors, good light coming from the west. Music drifted over from the restaurant that had opened across the alley 6 months ago. The city sounded the way a city sounds when something in it is actually working. I thought about my father driving slowly past this building, block after block, season after season, watching something take shape that he hadn't planned and couldn't take credit for, and had decided, late, to protect. I thought about that deed restriction, filed on a Tuesday afternoon, 14 months before he died, in a law office downtown. An old man who understood property and return on investment, and the mechanics of commerce deciding, with whatever part of himself had gone quiet enough to listen, that the thing worth protecting wasn't the asset. It was the person building something on top of it. My hands were in my lap. The calluses were real, earned over years of work that no one in my family had ever thought to ask about in any detail. I looked at them in the dock light. I didn't feel angry. What had looked like resentment in the early years had become something more useful. A clarity about what I was building and why. I wasn't building it to prove anything to them anymore. I'd let go of that somewhere around the 3rd window I replaced with my own hands in that first November, standing on a ladder in a building with no heat, fitting glass into frames I'd built myself because I couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. The approval had always been the wrong thing to want. What I'd actually needed was space. Space to find out what I was capable of without anyone else's verdict in the room. And they had given me exactly that. Not on purpose, not with any grace, not with the smallest acknowledgement of what they were doing, but the result was the same. The small side table I'd built for my sister's housewarming, the one she'd dismissed without really seeing, was still in my showroom. First piece through the door, the one I'd made when I had nothing but the building and a set of tools and the stubbornness to begin. I'd had offers on it over the years. I always said it wasn't available, not out of bitterness. I kept it because it was a record of who I'd been when I decided to stop asking for permission. Outside, the lights on the alley path had come on, low and warm against the brick. Somewhere on the block, a door opened and someone laughed. The sounds loose and good in the evening air. I sat there until the cold came up from the concrete, and then I went inside. I had work to finish in the morning.